let's talk about some of the challenges they're going to face, specifically on the economy. The Congress is going to face this week the issue of whether or not to send a lifeline to the auto companies. We heard what Arnold Schwarzenegger said about it. Here was Governor Jennifer Granholm of Michigan.
The auto industry would crumble if one of them went into bankruptcy. If GM is not buying from suppliers, those same suppliers are supplying to the rest of the auto industry too. But if they see major a major collapse in their major customer, then they are not going to be able to survive.
Some estimates, George, will that a collapse would cost the federal government in the long run $200 billion.
Yes, because among other things, the pensions would then go to the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, which is already $14 billion in debt. But to Governor Granholm, she says the automobile industry would crumble. It's crumbled. It's collapsed. People who say General Motors is too big to fail have not noticed that it has failed. This week, a statement from General Motors, official statement, said the General Motors board sees nothing in the performance of its management team to cause them to lose confidence in it. How about the complete evaporation of shareholder value?
You know, this is an agonizing thing, and if there were any kind of normal time, the answer would be clear. Let the thing go into bankruptcy. Chapter 11 continues to operate, restructure a lot of stuff. There are two reasons why this is a big problem now, why I'm kind of very reluctantly screaming in favor of some kind of bailout. One is that the credit markets are frozen. So normally a company can keep operating, declare Chapter 11, but it keeps operating. But that depends on being able to continue to get credit lines to do business. And you can't do that right now. So Chapter 11 quickly becomes Chapter 7, which is liquidation. So we actually see the thing disappear. And then we're talking about 1 million+ jobs probably disappearing. The other is we're in the middle of this terrible, terrible slump. And letting GM go under is an enormous anti-stimulus policy. It would be working towards a major negative blow to the economy. So we're really in St. Augustine territory here. You grant me chastity and continence, but not yet. This is not a good time to stand on principle and say we shouldn't bail these guys out.
Thank goodness I can take a forthright position. I'm with both these guys. In the long run, George is right. In the long run, we need to preserve the marketplace philosophy of how we've run all these years. In the short run, I think Paul is right. If we don't try to get hold of this tapeworm with this terrible medicine right now, because the medicine is not something we want to keep in our system. Believe me, I think the tapeworm can consume enough that we're going to be, for years, regretting it. It's better to put money into it now. People say, well, yeah, they'll be back in a year. They'll be back in a year for more. They may be.
That's the real problem. You save all the money and it won't work anyway.
That's the problem, is that they're basically saying trust us. And, they're saying don't use the $25 million that we've already got in the pipeline, because that is there to have us get more fuel-efficient cars. And we have to have more fuel-efficient cars in order to survive. So let's keep going with that money to do the thing that will be a long-term survival and give us some short-term money to keep us up and going. But that means you have to trust them that they're going to do the right thing and have the efficiency.
You also have to trust the Congress, which gave us Amtrak, that they know how to design automobiles. That's what they're doing in that building behind us, is deciding what automobiles ought to be designed, on what timetable, and will the market buy them? Well, they've already decided the market won't buy the Volt, the electric GM car, because the Congress has already written in a $7,500 tax credit to try and bribe buyers for this otherwise unsaleable product.
And how do you know it's not out? It will be out next year.
They've already written it in.
But it leads to a separate question, because it does look, because of these complications, like Congress probably will not act this week. Right. And then nobody's back until January 20th. And I guess one of the questions I have is, can GM especially last until January 20th? And if they go into bankruptcy, will consumers just say, wait a second, there's no way I am buying a car from a bankrupt company?
This is, from a political point of view, almost, if you're a Democrat, you say this is good, because the issue will be taken out of our hands by force. But from the point of view of the economy, it's another major blow. So I think you have to, if I were Democrat congressional leaders, if I were Obama, I'd say you have to make every effort to get something in place, because, this is, the trouble is the economy is in a deep nosedive right now, and this is adding to it. This is just a really bad time to be doing long-run virtuous things.
Paul, one of the arguments made against bankruptcy this week was that would obviate, perhaps shred, the existing labor contracts under which GM retirees get health care. And it was said in print that would be terrible, because that would hurt retirees too young for Medicare. Why are there retirees too young for Medicare? If people want to retire before 65 or 35, that's their business. But it is not a national crisis.
Well, look, there are a lot of reasons why that happens. It's too complicated to get into. But the point of the matter is, look, again, everything is, if this were 1999 and we had 4% unemployment and a booming economy, I would have no hesitation in saying, let the thing go. Let the market work.
Also, their labor contracts have been renegotiated to be very much in line with the labor contracts of foreign car manufacturers. So that they've been trying to solve those kinds of problems. I just think that what Congress needs to do is come back this week and do a quick public works, public service bill like they did in 1982 in the lame duck session after that congressional election when the unemployment was at 10%, and they came back and you know, quickly got some infrastructure stuff up and running. We can always use better roads and bridges.
Well, that may be what they should do, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen this week either. And now, Sam, though, but because the problem is so great, economic advisors are telling Senator Obama, President-elect Obama, and I think Paul Krugman wrote this on Friday, $600 billion, that they're going to need a stimulus package far more than anybody's talked about, $600 billion.
So let's do it. So let's do it. I mean, again, this idea that somehow we shouldn't use extraordinary measures that we wouldn't ordinarily believe is good for us economically to try to stave off absolute disaster is nonsense. We need more, if that's what it takes. I agree. Politically, Cokie, it looks like nothing's going to happen in the lame duck session. Now, but next year, I hope it's not too late, there should be a massive program, and I'm for infusing it at the local level. For instance, mortgages, I want to go, I think John McCain had some sort of idea, although he took it. Let's buy out the mortgages of individual homeowners rather than say to the banks, oh, okay, here we are, we'll help you, and see if we can't keep people in their homes that way.
Sam, one of the ways we turned a depression into the Great Depression that didn't end until the Japanese fleet appeared off Hawaii was that there were no rules, and investors went on strike because the government was completely improvising. Net investment was negative through almost all of the 30s because, again, people did not know the environment in which they were operating because the government had the fidgets and would not let rules and markets work.
This is not the way it looks. Okay, well, it's not the way I read the history. It's not the way you say. No, what actually happened?
About net
investment?
No,
the negative net investment is because, you know, when you have 20% unemployment and all the factories are standing idle, who wants to build a new one? You don't need to invoke the government to explain that. No, what actually happened was, you know, it was an enormous. There was a collapse of the financial system, which was not restored for a long time. There was a persistent deep slump in consumer demand and therefore no investment demand, and so you were stuck in this trap. Roosevelt got the economy moving somewhat. By 1937 things were a lot better than they were in 1933, and then he was persuaded to balance the budget, or try to, and he raised taxes and cut spending, and the economy went back down again, and then took an enormous public works program known as World War II to bring the economy out of the depression.
Which is what Sam is saying. Throw anything at it that you can to try to stave off anything that disastrous.
And that means most likely, Sam, though, that the president-elect will have to put off any plans for tax increases next year.
Or for health care, or for a variety of other things.
George is right.
The way at least people like me are pushing, I think what will happen is there's going to be push for legislation to do things on health care. But that wasn't really ever going to happen. It wasn't ever going to go into effect until 2011 because we weren't going to so much raise taxes as let the Bush tax cuts expire.
In 2010, so you have a year's grace period.
At the end of 2010. And so no, so it's not clear that no one was really going to talk about doing a lot of new spending of that kind, long-term spending next year anyway.
Excuse me, Paul. Who's no one? Barack Obama. What he didn't put a price tag on and said, I would promise to spend this much money. His supporters, young people particularly, who saw him as walking on water, you bring an interesting point, may be very disillusioned if he wisely cannot pursue all of these programs.
But I think Paul does at least point the way towards a rhetorical solution. You say you're for health care, you introduce it, but you just
don't pass it.
Well, you don't pass it.
Well,
it's going to take months to pass it anyway. But the funding mechanism is the expiration of the Bush tax cuts. You don't impose any kind of a tax increase.
Yeah, you know, Bush tax cuts were written blessedly from the point of view of the Democrats to turn to a pumpkin on the last day of 2010.
What am I listening to?
And
I can recite. People making over $250,000 a year, a very small percentage, will only go back to where President Clinton's tax rates were, and we need to do this out of fairness. I mean, I can recite his speech.
But if it happens in 2010 instead of 2009, that's a broken promise?
Well,
yeah, I don't think it's...
Well, it depends.
We'll see. That is the open question. You guys can debate in the green room, and you all can join in later.